For my 100th War Thunder aircraft review, I'm very pleased to show you the Bell P-39Q-15 Airacobra, one of the rarest vehicles in all of War Thunder. Let's check it out. The P-39 was originally designed in the late 1930s in response to a U.S. Army Air Corps requirement for a single-engine, high-speed fighter to attack hostile aircraft at higher altitude. The development program was quite innovative, and was one of the first times that a combat aircraft was designed specifically around its weapons system, rather than adapting weapons to fit an existing aircraft's design. In fact, the most famous feature of the P-39, the mid-mountain engine, was done to make room in the nose for its heavy 37mm cannon, along with additional machine guns. The high-altitude performance ended up being a bit less than expected, and the plane only saw limited service with the United States Army. However, when the P-39 was offered under the Lend-Lease program in World War II, the Soviet Union became very enthusiastic about the aircraft, and eventually became the most prolific user. The vast majority of the P-39's combat service was at the hands of Soviet pilots, and the upgraded N and Q versions they received proved to be very well suited for the type of low-level air combat that was developing over the Eastern Front. Now, despite common misconceptions, the Soviets primarily used the P-39 as a fighter, not as a ground attacker. The misconception is due to a poor translation of some Soviet tactical documents into English, but in fact, the P-39 was only very rarely used in dedicated ground attack roles. Its primary mission was basically just to do low and mid-level fighter sweeps over the battlefield, to clear the way for the dedicated ground attackers, the IL-2s, Su-6s, and so on. As such, the vast majority of the P-39's use was purely for air-to-air combat, where its heavy firepower was used to great effect. In fact, the famous pilot, Alexander Pokrishkin, scored 47 kills with the Airacobra, which was the highest number scored by a single pilot with any American plane during the war. Almost half of all P-39s produced ended up being delivered to the Soviets, and many of their top aces scored at least some of their kills flying it. The P-39Q was the final production run of the aircraft and saw numerous improvements over the previous versions, and even within its own production series, with the Q-15 featuring some structural reinforcements, a slightly redesigned electrical system, along with minor tweaks to its armor. Now, after the war, the Soviet P-39s were phased out of service and gradually replaced with native designs, but a small number ferried on in reserve units all the way up until 1950. There are a handful of P-39s in War Thunder, but what we're looking at right now is the P-39Q-15, a premium vehicle in the Soviet air tree. This is one of the rarest vehicles in the entire game, and was originally given out only one time as a free gift to players who participated in alpha testing War Thunder. The exact numbers are difficult to confirm, but this is one of the rarest vehicles that's ever been available to regular players, due to the low number who qualified to get it, and the small number of those qualifying players who still had active accounts when it was given out. In any case, it'll probably never be available again, and this is quite a rare treat, so I sincerely hope you enjoy this review. The Q-15 is in rank 3 of the Soviet air tree, at battle ratings 3.3 or 3.7, depending on the game mode. The plane is armed with a centerline 37mm M4 cannon firing through the propeller, and 4 12.7mm M2 machine guns, 2 in the nose and 2 out on the wings. For the M2 machine guns, The plane gets a very basic selection of ammo belts. None of them are especially noteworthy, and I find the tracer belt to be the most effective for air-to-air combat, but really the default one isn't too bad either. For the 37mm cannon, the plane again gets a fairly basic set of belts, but this time they're a bit more useful. The ground target belt is capable of taking out medium tanks if you get a good vertical angle hit on them, especially from behind, but the air target belt ends up being by far the most useful, as its explosive rounds are highly effective at bringing down air targets. In practice, this gun can take down a fighter in one solid hit, and a bomber with less than 2 or 3 solid hits. Now, the plane can also take a centerline mounted 250 kilogram bomb. That's kilograms, not pounds. And this gives it a little bit of extra utility for ground attack. Now, one bomb doesn't exactly make this a multi-role fighter, but it allows the plane to attack targets of opportunity in arcade battles, and at least gives some ability for close air support. I usually take the bomb in air arcade or when just flying around in ground RB, but I generally don't bother in air realistic battles, and I'll get to that in a minute. Now, it's worth mentioning as a closing thought about the weapons, that the guns have wildly different ballistic trajectories, which can make precise aiming a little difficult until you really get the feel for how the 37mm fires compared to the 50 cals at different ranges. But I do occasionally find the vertical targeting setting to be of help with this. I don't always use it, but when I do, I set the vertical targeting and convergence out to 700 meters with this plane. The flight performance of the Q-15 is broadly similar to other P-39s, and it's generally pretty good. It's reasonably fast for its BR, and its rate of climb stands out as noteworthy without the external bomb. In a WEP climb, only a small number of planes at this battle rating can match it, but the caveat is that its performance at high altitude really isn't that great. The Q-15 is much happier down low, and if climbed up to altitude, its turn performance, acceleration, and control responsiveness all suffer to a noticeable level. Still, the plane is totally competent as a bomber interceptor, and its dive performance is quite good, so an initial side climb is a perfectly viable tactic with this. Now, this version of the P-39 has the additional gun pods fixed on the wings, which reduces its rate of roll a bit, and in a tight turn, its performance is going to be slightly inferior to some of the other P-39 models. The overall maneuverability is still pretty good, and its engine power, especially in WEP, helps vertical engagements, and sucking people into a dumb loop rate fight usually ends pretty badly for them if they don't turn out of it. The plane has combat flaps that can be used safely up to around 400 kilometers an hour. Flying the P-39Q-15 into air battles is pretty fun, and it can be reasonably effective. In arcade battles, the limited ammo of the 37mm cannon is a bit less of an issue, and really even just spamming fire all over the place, it isn't too difficult to get at least a few kills with every spawn because of getting the ammo back in the air. Taking the bomb does reduce the flight performance a bit, but in arcade battles, it's already pretty forgiving, so I find that taking the bomb is just a quick extra chance to, tag a strategic base or occasionally drop on some AI ground targets for extra points. Of course, it's possible to just ditch the bomb if there are no targets presenting themselves before the air combat begins, so really very little is lost by taking out the bomb into arcade battles. Now, in realistic battles, it's a bit of a different story. My general strategy with this plane is to try and side climb and look for bombers to intercept. At this BR, only a small number of planes can match the Q-15's climb performance, and it's often possible to get up there without any escort fighters to worry about. I don't usually take the bomb, sometimes for playing around at low level but not usually, into realistic battles. The hit to the climb performance just isn't worth it. Anyway, after intercepting what I can up at high levels, using the Aerocobra's excellent dive performance sometimes lets me get the jump on people and enables pretty good boom and zoom tactics. Sometimes I dive in and engage in more traditional dogfights, not because it's especially more effective, but just for fun. This plane generally does okay with close-in fighting, so I like to mix it up sometimes. Now, flying out to close air support is an opportunity for some pretty flexible gameplay. The plane only has one bomb, so it's not going to be the king of ground battles or anything, but it's a chance to make a drop on a target as you're hunting for aircraft. I borrow a page right out of the Soviet playbook for this plane, and I try to use it to prowl around looking for enemy aircraft to take out, and give cover to my team on the ground and the other dedicated ground attack aircraft as best I can. Unfortunately, the plane is pretty fragile sometimes, and even light amounts of damage can be enough to seriously cripple its flight performance. But while it's undamaged, it generally has the performance to make a really credible show of itself in low-altitude combat. Visually, the P-39Q-15 looks pretty much like other Aerocobras, except for its unique paint job and the gun pods out on the wings kind of standing out a little from some of the previous versions. Now, I've always liked the unusual appearance of this plane, with those side-opening cockpit doors, the mid-mounted engine exhaust, and that streamlined bullet-shaped nose. It just looks great to me. Now, the paint job that comes with the plane is unique, and it features some odd white striping and asymmetrical colored discs underneath the red stars out on the wings that are left over from when they painted over the American markings. The unusual white trim on this model is something that I first suspected was the paint job of a specific ace, though I wasn't really sure which one it might be. But after digging, it seems that this is actually fairly representative of a few of the different late-war P-39Q units. This is the only skin available for the plane. Landing the Q-15 is utterly simple compared to other low-tier prop aircraft. It has very stable flight performance in a landing configuration, and with its tricycle landing gear, there isn't any worry about nosing over when braking or anything like that. This plane is really easy to land. The cockpit internals are okay, but if I'm being honest, the canopy bracing gets in the way a bit more than I'm willing to overlook in some really inconvenient places. The top of, the side door bracing really gets in the way when dogfighting more than you think it might. But the visibility to the rear is basically unobstructed, and that's actually kind of important. The instruments are okay, and overall, it's a pretty typical P-39 cockpit. To close out on the Bell P-39Q-15 Aerocobra. This plane has pretty excessive forward firepower for its battle rating, and if the 37mm cannon connects, whatever it tags is going to be in a world of pain. It has very good climb and dive performance. Really, it's just all around excellent in the vertical axis. It has acceptable maneuverability in a turn fight below about 3,000 meters. It's one of the easiest low-tier props in the game to land, and it can carry a bomb. However, its roll rate isn't the best, its performance at higher altitude suffers a bit, and it doesn't really absorb damage very well. And lastly, it's made of pure, refined, 100% weapons-grade unobtainium alloy. If you don't already have it, you'll probably never be able to get it. The final verdict on the P-39Q-15 is that in terms of its effectiveness in combat, it's not really a big departure from other P-39s, but its absurd rarity creates a bit of a stir if and when anyone actually recognizes it out in a match. As always, thanks for watching.